Hi friends, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Rachel, and in today's video, I'm going to be recommending my favorite completed series to you all. These are series that I think you should totally binge. I have so many series to talk about today that I absolutely love. Some of the books in the series are not as good as others, but I still think they're totally worth your time. You should definitely pick them up. If you have similar taste to me, you need to read these series. I have a fantasy romance, adult fantasy, YA fantasy, and even a contemporary romance series that I think is so worth your time. So let's get into my favorite completed series and I'll tell you what I love about them. So first up, we have one of my favorite fantasy romance series, and that is the Lady of Darkness series by Melissa K. Rorick. This is a special edition of the series. I'm gonna put them down because they are so heavy. The Lady of Darkness series follows our main character, Scarlet. Scarlet is an assassin and she is known as Death's Maiden. She is very fierce, very dangerous, and she works under an assassin's guild. When she receives a new assignment from the leader of the assassins, this sets her off on a path to run into a very mysterious and very handsome stranger. They start to get to know one another, they spend a lot more time around each other, and so much is uncovered from there. This whole series has fae, vampires, witches, courts, a huge explosive plot that is barely touched on in the first book. Once you get farther into the series, it becomes so big, it becomes multi-POV. The found family in this book is absolutely incredible, and there are so many romances to root for. So in the series, we have Lady of Darkness, book 2 is Lady of Shadows, book 3 is Lady of Ashes, book 4 is Lady of Embers, and this is actually my favorite book in the series. It is so good. There's romance things that happen in this book that I am obsessed with. And then the final book is Lady of Starfire, which is a very satisfying finale. I think this is my second favorite book in the series. I think the series is so much fun. I think it's totally worth binging. Melissa K. Rorick is one of my new all-time favorite fantasy romance authors. I really love her Legacy series. That is like a 6-star series to me, but her Lady of Darkness series is really great as well. This is her first series and it is connected to the Legacy series, so I think it's really fun to read both of them. Let's also talk about spice. So spice is very subjective, so I do want to put that out there. What I think is spicy, you may not think is spicy, vice versa, but I do want to give you guys an idea of each of these series and their spice levels. This series, I would say, maybe has like 2 spicy peppers out of 5. As the series does go on, we do have more couples falling in love, we do have more spicy scenes, but definitely the fantasy elements, the fantasy plot is much more at the forefront of what the story is about. But there are some amazing scenes in this book for sure, and you definitely see more of that towards the end of the series. The next series is the Sacred Stones trilogy by Kate Golden. Talk about bingeable. These books are very fun, very fast paced. There is world building and explanation of magic systems in this series, but it's not too dense, so I feel like it is the perfect series that you could honestly binge in like a week if you went super hard. I love this series because of the romance. The romance is between Arwen and Cain. In the beginning of the first book, A Dawn of Onyx, we meet Arwen. She is a healer with special powers. She ends up getting kidnapped by a rival kingdom, the Onyx Kingdom, and she is sent to live in the dungeons as the evil Onyx King decides what he wants to do with her. But as Arwen starts to get to know the people of the Onyx Kingdom and all of these things going on over there, she realizes that a lot of what she has been told may not be accurate, and there's a lot about herself that she is unaware of. Like I said, the romance in this book is so good, and it is slow burn. We don't get everything in book 1, which honestly I appreciate with a trilogy. The second book is A Promise of Peridot, and then the final book is A Reign of Rose. I recently finished this and I loved it so much. It has the sweetest ending, and I think the series is such a perfect one to binge. And for spice, like I said, it is slow burn. I'd probably give this series like 1 spicy pepper, but I think the romance is really sweet and the banter and tension is amazing. Next up, we have a recently completed duology that I absolutely love, and that is the Crimson Moth duology. We have Heartless Hunter and Rebel Witch. I read Heartless Hunter last year and I really liked it, but I just finished Rebel Witch and I absolutely loved it. It's a 5-star, so this duology is just one of my new favorites. Heartless Hunter follows Rune and Gideon. Rune is a witch and she is known as the Crimson Moth, and Gideon is a witch hunter who has been hunting down the Crimson Moth for a very long time. Their paths cross. We watch them fight their feelings for one another as the world bursts into chaos around them, as the witches and the powers that be continue to war. These books have 0 spice in them, I would say, or if they do have spice, it's like the gentlest whisper of a spicy pepper. It's more like fresh ground pepper, honestly, but that's not why we're here. This is a YA fantasy duology, and the tension in this duology, particularly in Rebel Witch, I think is better than some of the tension in adult fantasy romance books that I have read that fully go there. The way that Kristen Ciccarelli wrote the chemistry between these two characters is unmatched. It is so palpable, and I got butterflies reading this. I think the romance is so strong. It's my favorite thing about this duology. Next up is one of my favorite trilogies ever. I love it so much. I will not hear a word of criticism about these books. I think they are perfect, and that is The Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. This series is so incredible, so epic, so intense. The focus on family, the focus on being a woman in a man's world, the high stakes. I love absolutely everything about this series. So the first book is Jade City, and in this book we discover we are following the Call family. The Call family is the latest family in charge of the city's jade distribution. Jade is a source of magic, it is a source of power, and so it is highly coveted. Families all over the island of Kekon are fighting over it, are trying to get control of it, and we watch the Call family as each member navigates that duty and responsibility in different ways. It gives a little bit of the Sopranos and Mafia vibes, but my favorite thing about the series is the characters. I just think they are so well written. I was so attached to them. I love them all so much. I think about them all the time. Hilo is everything. He is one of my favorite characters I have ever read about, and the generational saga that the series ends up being. Like, when you get to the final book, several years have passed, so much has happened, people have had children, a new generation is rising up, and there is so much pain in this trilogy as well, like pure devastation. I would call this an urban fantasy, as a lot of this book does take place in a city, and I just think it is such a fascinating story. No spice rating for this series. I mean, there is romance, there are, I think, like some sex scenes, but that's not, once again, not why we're here. So we have, of course, the first book is Jade City, the second book is Jade War, and the final book is Jade Legacy. My God. I just like cried on and off for the last like 20% of this book, because what a way to end this series. Another one of my all-time favorite trilogies that you should binge is the Folk of the Air series by Holly Black. I love this series so much. I love Jude and Cardan so much. This is a YA fantasy series. There is romance, but there isn't any spice, but we don't need any because Jude and Cardan's tension is just so, it's unmatched. Truly, Holly Black is one of the only authors, I think, who has written a successful enemies to lovers romance. There are so many other series out there that claim to be enemies to lovers, but they do not go to the lengths to establish the enemies portion like Holly Black did, particularly in book one. The series might not be for everyone, but it was definitely for me. I absolutely love how unhinged Cardan is. I love the strength of Jude. I love this world and setting. It is so magical. We have the very wicked fae that Jude and her family live alongside. She is a human, and her family end up moving to fairy, and she has to acclimate with the fae who absolutely hate humans, and that is how she meets Cardan, who is just the most stuck up, like self-centered, rude fae you could ever meet. And I love him. He also has a tail, which is very interesting. Still don't know how I feel about that, but I absolutely love Cardan Greenbrier. I absolutely love Jude Duarte. This is such a fun trilogy. I think it is so action-packed. First book is Cruel Prince. The second book is The Wicked King. This is my favorite in the series. And then the final book is The Queen of Nothing, a very satisfying ending. Another fantasy romance series that I absolutely love that recently finished that is so bingeable is the Legends of Thesmar series by Helen Shore. There are 4 books in the series: Blood and Steel, Vows and Ruins, Fate and Furies, and Shadow and Storms. This was a series that just got better and better for me as I continued to read. The first book is Blood and Steel. In this book, we meet our main character. Her name is Althea Embervale. She lives in a world where women are not allowed to be warriors, are not allowed to be war swords, even though the kingdom that we live in is constantly under threat of shadow wraiths. She and her sister are at an academy training to be alchemists, but Thea has always felt the call of being a warrior. Her ultimate goal is to be a war sword, which is basically like the highest ranking military magical warrior, but as we know, the world that she lives in prevents her from doing so. However, after getting caught watching the warrior training academy and practicing some of their moves, Thea actually gets a chance to enter the academy. There are some unprecedented circumstances that lead to her ability to be the only girl in this entire male academy, and she gets trained under the very grumpy Wilder Hawthorne. He is a legendary war sword, and as Thea and Wilder get to know each other, we have just the most amazing trainer-trainee trope. I absolutely love that trope. I think it kills every single time, and in this series, it is so much fun. Now, as far as spice goes, if you're looking for a completed fantasy romance series that has spice that you can binge, this is it. this is your place. This is where you're gonna go. Every single book is spicy. Every single book has multiple spicy scenes. I think the author does a really good job of making the plot go forward, also developing the relationship, including those spicy scenes. For me, I do feel that Helen Shore has a really nice balance, but be aware, it's all over the place, okay? We have a lot of it. So if that's your thing, Legends of Thesmar is definitely for you. All right, this next series, I cannot even hold it up in its entirety. So we're just gonna make a little attempt here. Oh my God, we have the Zodiac Academy series. So the Zodiac Academy series recently completed. I don't recommend this to everyone. This is definitely a darker fantasy romance series, as we do have the bully romance trope that is throughout most of the series. Things do kind of calm down as you get farther into like books 5, 6, 7, but it starts out pretty intense. So it's not for everyone. If you are into darker romance, if you know that you like bully romance, the series is gonna be for you, but definitely know this is not for everyone. I really ended up enjoying this series overall. I do have some complaints about the latter half of the series. It does get a little bit repetitive, but oh my God, the finale, book 9, like the last third of that book is perfection and did make up for a lot of my kind of negative feelings towards the end of the book, but I still think this series is so worth the binge because it is so much fun and devastating and wild and crazy. So book 1, The Awakening. We are following twins Tori and Darcy Vega. They are living, I think, in Chicago. They are orphans. They are struggling to survive. One day they're approached by a man who says he is from another realm and that they're the long lost heirs to the Solaria throne. He tells them that they need to go with him to the Zodiac Academy to train their powers and then eventually take the throne. They agree to go with him to this academy. They're not so sure about taking the throne, but they are very interested to see what Solaria is all about. When they arrive at Zodiac Academy, they are met with 4 celestial heirs who have been training to take over the throne their whole life. Everyone thought that the Vega twins were dead, so these other heirs, Darius, Max, Caleb, and Seth, have been preparing to take it themselves, and they are not happy that the Vega twins are back, and they are going to make it their mission to make these girls' lives absolute hell. This series is so wild, so crazy. If you like magical schools, if you like enemies to lovers, bully romance, if you like found family, I do really think you'll love this series. I love so many of the characters in this series. We have fae, vampires, witches, werewolves, like every magical being that you can ever think of, and such an interesting romance development and dynamic between our characters. Things get absolutely wild, but I definitely think it's worth your time. As far as spice goes, this is a spicy series. I would definitely say once you get to like book 3 and beyond, I can't quite remember if there is spice in book 1 or 2. I feel like if there is, it's barely there, but I would say overall this series is probably like a 2.5 to 3 spicy peppers out of 5. There are definitely some more intense scenes in later books, but then other books have like barely anything, so it's a bit of a mixed bag. Next, I have the only contemporary romance completed series on this list. This is my favorite contemporary romance series, even though one of the books I don't love as much as the others, but overall I still do really love the series, the found family of it all, the setting, the writing, and that is the Chestnut Springs series. If you told me like 2 years ago that I was going to love a cowboy romance, I would have laughed in your face. When I first started hearing about this series, I was like, sounds cool, have fun you guys, but I will never pick up the series. Cowboys, ranch, bull riders, all that, not my thing. I had absolutely zero interest in it. But then one day I decided to pick up actually the second book in the series. These are interconnected standalones. You could technically read them out of order. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can. I read the second book in the series first, which is Heartless, and my life was changed. This is my favorite romance book I have ever read. I think it is so good. It is single dad, nanny. Oh my God. It is truly life-changing, truly brain-changing, truly the molecules in my body all rearranged. Do they do that? I don't know, but Cade and Willa are everything to me. This book is so much fun, tension-filled, very spicy, very full of heart, and such a special book to me. And this set me on my path to discover I do like a cowboy romance. So I started with the second book and then I went back and read Flawless. The third book is Powerless. The fourth book is Reckless. This is my second favorite book in the series. It is so good. Also has the surprise pregnancy trope, which is another trope that I didn't think I'd be very interested in, but the way that it was done in this book was incredible and I absolutely loved it and I can't imagine it any different. Theo and Winter are amazing to me. They give me like Cassian and Nesta. I just love them so much. The final book in the series is Hopeless. This is my least favorite book in the series. I don't think it's like a totally terrible book, but it's definitely the weakest for me. There's multiple things about this book that I don't love and I was pretty disappointed with, but once again, overall, I do really like the series. And like I said, this series is spicy. I would give it probably 2.5, 3 stars out of 5 for spiciness. It's definitely there. There's so much buildup, so much tension, and I really like the way that Elsie Silver writes spice. All right, and then last, but certainly not least, my #1 recommendation for a completed fantasy series that you can binge and it's gonna ruin your life. I had to do it. You guys know I had to do it. If you've been watching my channel, I'm sure you already know what series I'm about to share with you guys. But if there's anyone out there who you've never heard of this series, or you have it on your TBR but you haven't felt a push to read it, let me be that push for you. I 100% recommend the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. This is my favorite series of all time. I feel like this is such a popular series. Do I even need to recommend it? I kind of feel like me recommending Throne of Glass to a bunch of fantasy and fantasy romance readers is me being like, hey, have you guys tried water? It's really good. You should drink it. But like I said, it is worth talking about because it is just that good. If you don't know what the Throne of Glass series is about, we follow Selena Sardothian. She is an assassin who gets taken out of the prison that she has been in for a year to compete at a chance at becoming the King of Otterland's assassin. Along the way, she uncovers a lot of mystery and magic surrounding the world that she lives in, the history of this kingdom, and herself. There's so much more. Like, that's nothing. I basically told you nothing, okay? But that's where the series starts, which feels very quaint when you think about like where things end up in Kingdom of Ash. I recommend reading The Assassin's Blade first. I know that this is an area where people have strong feelings. I don't care how you read it however you want. This is my recommendation though. Read The Assassin's Blade first. I have read the series multiple ways and I prefer reading this book first. The reason why is because #1, reading The Assassin's Blade first is the chronological order. The events that happen in The Assassin's Blade do occur before the events of Throne of Glass. So you follow Selena's story chronologically, which makes a lot of sense to me. And then also reading The Assassin's Blade first is the much more emotionally devastating version of this series. The first time I read this series, I actually read The Assassin's Blade third. And so I read Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, and then I got to this. And there were so many things that I missed in Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight that if you read this first, you know about, and they're just so much more heartbreaking. When those things came up in Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight, I just didn't really care because I didn't know what they meant. And then when I read The Assassin's Blade, I was like, oh, okay, that's what that meant. But it just didn't hit me as hard. The second time I read this series, I read this first, and oh my God, I cannot recommend it enough. It impacts you so much. And starting with Selena's origin and then just going in order, I think is the most emotionally devastating and gratifying way. So in the Throne of Glass series, we have The Assassin's Blade, Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, Heir of Fire, Queen of Shadows, one of the best books ever written. I love it so much. Empire of Storms, Tower of Dawn, and Kingdom of Ash. Oh, I also wanted to give my personal recommendation regarding the tandem read. So Empire of Storms and Tower of Dawn. Empire of Storms comes first and then Tower of Dawn. Someone did create a guide to read these books at the same time, aka the tandem read, because some of the characters in the earlier books end up kind of going off on their own adventure. That happens in this book, but then the main crew is still in this book and these events are happening at the same time. So you could technically tandem read them and use that guide and basically make this one giant book. I have read these books separately and I have done the tandem read. I much prefer reading them separately. I don't recommend the tandem read. Honestly, it was stressful to me. I didn't like having to switch back and forth between the books, and SJM wrote these books separately, so I think read them separately. I didn't have an issue reading these books back to back or reading these books as their own story, and I definitely recommend that you do as well. In regards to spice, there are a few scenes in this book and even in this book, but very far and few between. I would give it like half a spicy pepper. All right, friends, so those are all of my favorite completed series that I think you should absolutely binge if you have not started them already. Please let me know down in the comments what are some of your favorite completed series. I would love to add them to my TBR. Or if you'd like to leave an emoji, go ahead and leave the crown emoji. My TikTok, Instagram, Goodreads, and Patreon book club are all linked down below. I really appreciate that you watched this video. I hope that you're having a fantastic day. I love you all so much, and I will catch you guys in the next one.